everyone, welcome to another bumblestitchesflosstube Extra. If you don't know me, my name's Nicola and I do these Flosstube videos and Flosstube Extras. And what I mean by an extra is it's not my normal Flosstube channel videos. This is just some little extra bits and pieces that I think or hope you might be interested in seeing. It's Sunday the 7th of February today here on the east coast of the UK, and as you can see behind me, it's very snowy. It's almost like a blizzard at the moment, so I thought the best thing to do today would be to stay in the warm in the sewing room, and I thought I'd share what I'm up to today with you. I've shown these project bags a couple of times on my Flosstube episodes using patchwork, and I've had quite a few people ask for a tutorial. I have mentioned also as well previously that there are lots of tutorials on making this style of bag already on YouTube, so I don't want to just replicate what somebody else has already done. And also there are lots of people that make project bags like this to sell, and I don't want to take anything away from them. But what I would like to do is share how I make the patchwork portions for my bags in case you wanted to have a go yourself. So as you can see, they're just squares, but I've got a little trick that you may have seen before, but you may not have. So I thought it'd be nice to share it all with you. And it's just a little trick to help make making the patchwork panel a little bit easier. So I'm going to go into the sewing room now, and you won't see my face again till the end of the video, but that's okay because I'm going to be showing you exactly how to make that patchwork panel. So I'll see you in the sewing room. Welcome to the sewing room. You've got the view of my ironing board at the moment, and I'm just going to show you some of the bits and pieces that I'm using today to make this panel. These are my squares already cut out, but let me just show you what I started with. Now you can use a charm pack for this, you can use scraps, you can use fat quarters, anything that you've got to hand that makes a pleasing patchwork. So I've got 5 different fabrics here, all quilting weight. You'll also need, most importantly, you'll need some iron-on interfacing. And this is just a lightweight one. It's just a very generic lightweight interfacing. I think I just picked this one up in Hobbycraft. So that's essential. You'll also need, when you've made your panel sort of going forward to make your bag, you'll need some fabric for lining and a zip and stuff like that, but that you'll find that on other tutorials on YouTube. So here are my patchwork squares already cut out. So 2.5 inch squares, and you'll need 35 of them to make the bag I showed earlier, because it will be 7 squares across by 5 squares down. So I'll get prepared for the next stage and I'll see you in a moment. I've got my interfacing ready. This piece is 18 inches across by 13 down, and that is a little bit bigger than the bag will be because we haven't done the seams yet, so that will obviously be taken up by the seam allowances. The next stage is to take your pre-cut squares, your 35 squares, and I've laid mine out on my design board. You can sit and faff around with how you like the patchwork to look, and I've laid them into the rows and columns how I like them the best. So I'm going to take my fabric squares and start laying them onto the interfacing, and because they're already square, you can use each one to line up the first one, and you want to make sure they're very close together but not overlapping. So just keep going along, following your chosen design with your patchwork, and you can see this one's going off a little bit. That's absolutely fine. And then just carry on placing your squares on. And this is the little bit that's a bit time consuming, but once you get this done, you'll save the time later on. So here we have the 35 squares all laid out in the design that I've sort of, the order that I've put them. And you can see they're not, some of them are almost touching, but as long as they're not overlapping, that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to just go and get the iron out, and we'll get these ironed onto the interfacing. My iron is ready. I'm using steam in my iron. I know not all interfacing say to use steam, but it's the way that I do it. But if you've got instructions on yours, then obviously follow those. So the iron's ready. One of my squares has got a little bit wonky. Okay, and I've got a tea towel ready. I just iron, when I'm using interfacing, I just iron through a clean tea towel. So the next stage is really simple. You just follow the instructions for your interfacing very carefully, and ask me how I know to do this very carefully. You want to get your cloth or tea towel, whatever you're using, and just very gently, almost as if you were putting icing on top of a cake, sort of roll it over so that you don't disturb your squares underneath. And then I'm just going to press, and I hope this doesn't wibble the camera too much. I'm just going to press this through until the fabric squares have stuck to the interfacing. I've got tiny bits sticking out here, but once I've got them sort of partially stuck on, I can move the cloth and just make sure that everything's stuck down properly. Okay, how are we doing? Now the little bit of overlap of the interfacing will stick to your tea towel or cloth, so don't use anything precious, but I find it sort of comes off anyway. Okay, these are not too badly stuck down, but I'm just going to manoeuvre it a little bit. And I'm just going to put the cloth the other way. And give it another good iron. I can just check under here now to make sure I'm getting right to the... And don't be afraid to give it a little blast of steam, just to really get that heat through to the adhesive. And if you've done any sewing before or made bags, you've probably used interfacing and you know exactly how to do this. Okay, that should be enough now. As you can see, I'm just having to peel that away from the edge. So now we have our squares, but instead of being all completely run away and wanting to escape, they're now all, as you can see, completely attached to our interfacing. There's a little bit here that hasn't quite stuck, so I'm just going to give that another little blast in the middle. Just to make sure everything's stuck down firmly. Hopefully that's done the trick now. Yep, I think I'm happy with that. The next thing I'm going to do with this is just take it to my cutting board and just trim off the excess of the interfacing, just get rid of those. So I'll do that, and then I'll see you next at the sewing machine. So I'll just go and get set up there. I've trimmed off the excess interfacing from my panel, so you can see it's all ready to stitch now. And I've got my 1/4 inch foot ready, or you just need to stitch a 1/4 inch seam. I prefer to use a 1/4 inch foot. And I'm just going to pop that on. I just use the normal stitch length that I would normally use on my sewing machine for sort of quilting or anything like that. So just pop that board down there. Now what you need to do now is fold, because we're going to sew along each of the horizontal and vertical lines to make our seams. And I'm going to start with the vertical. So you can see I'm just folding that over, and it will naturally want to crease, almost like a piece of paper, along the line of the squares, of the fabric squares. And I just sort of run it along with my finger just to sort of finger press it, because obviously you don't want to get a hot iron on that. And put that through your sewing machine and sew the 1/4 inch seam along. Okay, so you can see I've sewn that seam there, as you can see it, the threads. So when you open that, you can see that these have now formed a seam. And on the back, you've got sort of like the lip where the seam allowance is. So I'm going to now do all of these seams all the way across here. And then I'll show you what to do before we continue on to doing going the other way. Okay, so I've sewn all of those seams, so those are all the shorter seams, and you can see the difference now. And if I show you the back, you can see what we have. So I'll go and just set up by the ironing board, and I'll show you what we need to do now before we progress to sewing the seams in the other direction. Okay, so you might be able to see a bit clearer now where I've sewn all the way down these seams here. So the next thing we need to do obviously is press this, and just take care when you're pressing. I just like to give it a little bit of a finger press first. You don't need one of these wooden clappers, but if you can get one, I would highly recommend them. They are so good for helping you get nice flat seams when you're quilting or any sewing really. So just work your way across the piece. So I've pressed everything now to all the seams to one side, which you can see on the back. Now, because we now need to repeat the process, but by folding the seam this way and sewing along like we just did, but we need to be able to accommodate that seam going across. So what I'm going to do now is just take some really sharp scissors. Scissors have got a nice sharp point, and I'm just going to fold the same way that we sewed, and at each point here, just here, I'm going to cut that, just trying to get angled so that you can see what I'm doing, and just cut into between the two squares, but not into your seam line. So just go along and do that all the way along. So you can see now that these pieces are free, so that will allow us to have the flexibility we need when we sew the other way. So I'll just carry on and snip all of these. Okay, so those are all snipped. So I'm going to take this back over to the sewing machine. I'll sew the other way, and then I'll join you back here and show you how we finish pressing it so that it's a completed panel. I've completed the sewing now of all the seams, so you can see it's looking much more like the front of the patchwork bag that we're trying to achieve. when you sew the second lot of seams, you need to allow for the seams to go in opposite directions to reduce the bulk a little bit. So that's why I cut the little notches. You'll also notice the first row that I stitched, I actually forgot to do that. So I'm sure it'll work out fine though. It just helps to reduce the bulk a little bit. So I'm going to get this pressed now. And it is a little bit fiddly again because you've now got seams that want to go in different directions. Okay, I hope you're not getting too steamed up there from the iron. So you can see now we've got everything done, and you can see the way that it looks on the back with the seams going in different directions. This helps to just reduce the bulk at these intersections. And apart from this little bit where I had a bit of a brain fade and forgot to do it, but the rest should be fine. What this method does do though is it enables you to get good points on your squares because it's just one long seam. So it's really a cheats way of making sort of smaller square patchwork, and you can obviously do this with a smaller size. You can do it with 1 inch squares or 1.5, 2 inch, so on and so forth. So there's lots of it gives you a lot of flexibility. It means you haven't got quite so many little fiddly pieces to work with. I'm just going to give this another good press all over. I hope you enjoyed seeing me make my patchwork panel, which I'm going to use for a cross stitch project bag. Now, I'm by no means a professional, it's just how I do it, and as you can see I even forgot to sew some of the seams in the right direction, but it all turns out fine in the end. Here's the finished panel. Hope you can see that clearly, and as you can see all the intersections match up quite neatly. And it's already got the extra support of the interfacing, so that when you're making your bag, that will help giving it a little bit of body and stability. I did, while I had everything out, make another one. I found some squares of Liberty fabric that I'd bought ages ago, and I thought it was a good opportunity to sew those up too. So exactly the same method. And in actual fact, if you've got a fabric like Liberty Lawn, which is very, very fine, the stability is almost essential from the iron-on interfacing. So I've got a couple of bags that, or bag panels that are ready to be made up. I will link in the description box below this video the tutorial that I used to make my bags, and I'll see if I can find any others so that you've got a couple of choices for how to make the bags. And of course, when you get to make your actual bag, you can use your patchwork panel as the guide for how big to cut the top section and your lining and your backing as well. And I don't know if the camera will pick it up. On this particular one, I did some stitching just diagonally across, going through all the intersections, sort of like faux quilting. So you can add that, or you can sew all along just inside the seam, decorative, just sort of like in a quilting way. But however you do it, I hope you have fun, and let me know if you're planning on making one. And I'd love to see anything that you do make. If you just tag me, I'm at bumblestitches on Instagram. If you do make any with this, using this little video as a guide or inspiration, then I'd love to see them over there. But that's all for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.